What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh. We got Jays Jumpers, Jaron Jackson Jr.'s, John Morant's, Joe Johnson's, Ja Rass, of course. We've got Jays we got him for days. Josh, how you doing?
I'm so happy for Mac McClung, man.
Dude, Mac Daddy. I'm gonna have to look. I'm a little disappointed I didn't look to see if his middle name starts with a J, but I'm going. Well, I love this. Instead of like Matthew blank McClung, like Matthew nickname, middle name McClung, it's Matthew quotations Mac McClung. I'm all in on that. I do not see a middle name for Mac. We might just have to call him like J period Mac or something to get him in there. But I've been trying to tell y'all about Mac McClung every time. I've been trying to tell y'all, and now I saw a tweet that Mac McClung's Philadelphia 76ers jersey is going to be the most worn jersey on Fraternity Row for the next year. And I was like, that's probably pretty spot on.
Yeah, that's about right.
But absolutely electric.
And that dude's putting up numbers. He has legitimately turned himself. No, okay, we're talking G League here.
Mm-hmm.
But that dude has legitimately turned himself into a professional point guard, which is something I was never sure was going to happen, but had to happen if he was going to get to a point where he was bouncing, hanging around in the NBA, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's just not big enough to play the two. So just credit to him for sticking it, just hanging in there, and he seems to understand what his role in the NBA would be, and is doing everything he possibly can to make that happen and to carve out a place for himself. And then, of course, he always had this in his bag, and he got to. This is one of the benefits of nobody wanting to do the dunk contest is we get some elite dunkers in there who aren't elite NBA players, right?
Yeah, I totally get the 18, 3, and 5, by the way, is what he's averaging in the G League right now for the Delaware Bluecoats. But yeah, you're absolutely right that you're right that that's like him averaging 5 assists. I'm looking for his turnovers. Looks like he's averaging 4.7 assists this year. 4.7 assists to 1.7 turnovers. So, like you said, G League, and there are plenty of guys who play only in the G League for their entire career, or at least most of it. And then you get guys who are 35 and get their first 10-day contract in the NBA. But you're right, he has put himself into slightly I hesitate to do the whole Mac McClung is an NBA player because I'm not totally sure he is quite yet, but the point being is that he's definitely transforming his game from what and he's also shooting 50% from the 3-point line, which might be even more important.
Yeah, he all of a sudden has become an incredibly efficient player.
If you can take care of the basketball and knock down 3-pointers as a backup point guard, there's probably a spot for you in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is that I think. I understand that we would all love for Zion Williamson and John Morant to go toe-to-toe in the NBA's dunk contest. I get that. I understand. And we probably don't want Julius Randle in the 3-point contest. But I think there's – and, the marketing, logistics of it could be better, right? But what you don't get – because you could force guys to play in the dunk contest, but nobody's going to put the effort into the dunk contest pre-dunk contest than Mac McClung is, because it's really hard to show up with dunks that people haven't seen before, and he produced some dunks that people hadn't seen before, and if you're getting that in every dunk contest, just dunks that are being made on the first attempt, first of all, and second of all, dunks that are at least variations of things. At the very least, variations of things you've seen before and not the exact same things, that's ultimately a win for the hour and a half that the dunk contest is actually happening, rather than just the big stars actually in the moment. Because leading up to it, the hype might be better, but I'm not sure there's going to be a better dunk contest than what you got, between Trey Murphy and Mac McClung. I'm just not sure. I think that's just what the event is at this point.
Yeah, and He is when I saw that he was doing it, that was my first thought he is the perfect person. You couldn't have picked somebody better.
Right.
Right. If you can't get the big names. And I also saw by winning that dunk contest, he almost matched his career earnings
What's the payout for the dunk contest?
$100,000.
100 grand? That's a lot. That's a lot of money.
So he has that. I mean, he just doubled his career earnings essentially. So there's that part of it too.
How much money would you have to make for the winner of the dunk contest to get people lining up to do the dunk contest?
Oh, geez. I mean, you got to be talking well over $1 million.
Yeah,
Multiple
I'm
millions?
thinking like 5 to 10
Yeah.
for people to actually be, for you having to make decisions about who's going to be in the dunk contest rather than asking people to be in it.
Right. For John not to just say, I'm not doing the dunk contest.
Right, because I had signed a $200 million extension. I don't $5 to $10 million more dollars is not going to change my lifestyle. But for a guy like Mac McClung, like doubling your career earnings thus far, that's legit for sure. And for any guy who's been only in the G League at this point. So shouts to Mac McClung. I didn't watch a single second of the All-Star game. Did you?
No.
Yeah, I didn't watch a single second. Granted, I was doing other things, so I didn't just actively choose not to. But like, I didn't. At one point, I thought, oh right, I think the All-Star game's on right now, and I just had no interest in actually going to find it.
I'm a much bigger fan of Saturday than Sunday. Always have been.
Yeah. 100%. Just take the skills contest out, though. It's just kind of.
I like the skills contest.
I like the skills contest a little less every year. Anyways,
you got to appreciate the fundamentals.
I suppose in between the All-Star dunk contest, we're appreciating the fundamentals
and the 3-point shootout.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I would argue a 3-point shot is fundamentals at this point.
That's fair. Yeah, you're just basically watching, shoot around, right?
Yeah. Right. Alrighty, let's get into college hoops from the weekend. We have the NCAA's top 16 seeds for the NCAA tournament. We'll hop into that. We had a lopsided game in the way that most games aren't lopsided, and it was lopsided on both sides of the equation at different points during the game in the Big 12 between Kansas and Baylor. But before we get to those things, we'll hop into winners and losers from the week every Monday morning, and this February 20th Monday is no different. Josh, who's your winner?
Northwestern.
Okay. All right.
Picked up another win over one of the best teams in the Big Ten to sort of complete their demolition of the top of the conference by beating Indiana.
3-0 against the state of Indiana this year. 3-0.
Demolished Iowa by 20. That's 5 wins in a row. I made them my winner because 2 weeks ago, it was still like they got to make sure they get into the tournament thing, right? They were definitely in a good spot.
Sure.
But also, we're having a very different conversation had they, lost to Purdue and lost to Indiana. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden now, not only did they get those wins and then take care of business against Iowa in dominant fashion, now we're talking about, well, just how high of a seed can they get? They're making a case to be the second Big Ten team kind of off the board from the selection committee perspective. They're not quite there yet, I would argue. But if Indiana gets knocked out early in the Big Ten tournament, Northwestern goes to the semis and loses to Purdue or something, it's just a very different conversation. It's just how far can they go with this thing? And for a program that has made one NCAA tournament appearance, that's a pretty big deal. So just giving them credit for building on top of what they have already done, and now this is the best season in program history. Full stop. And right, they're beating everybody else at the top of the conference. It's just been remarkable. And so from a helping your NCAA tournament resume perspective, maybe there was a team that did more, and I think you're going to get to them in terms of what it means for their NCAA tournament hopes. But from a stock perspective, I would argue Northwestern won the week, and that's why they're my winner.
Yeah, Northwestern 20-7 now, 7-4 in quad one. No way that Northwestern's ever had a year they have more than 7 quad one wins, right? Even if you kind of retrofit the season to the net ranking system, no way, right?
I don't think so.
There's no way a team that had never made the tournament until 5 years ago? Was it 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah.
Had ever had more than what would have been equivalent to 7 quad one wins it's really hard to not get into the tournament if if you're 7-4 in quad 1 and then 10-6 in quad 1 and 2. But
I don't remember.
That would be hard to quantify. But anyways, the point, and I was going to where I was getting to. They went from 43rd to 39th in the net. They're still behind Rutgers and Illinois in the Big Ten in the net, as well as Maryland, Indiana, and Purdue. Of course, Indiana is still 18th in the net. Even though, like, I will continue to not totally understand the net. Like for the most part, I'm here for it. But like, Northwestern doesn't have a quad 3 or 4 loss. They have more quad 1 wins than Indiana, a better overall record. They have 2 more quad 2 losses, but they're 21 spots behind Indiana.
Right.
I don't totally understand how it works, and I know that part of it is just where you started, but they're 6-2 on the road. They're 1-1 in neutrals. Indiana is 4-6 on the road and 1-1 in neutrals. They have a better record at home at 14-1, but like, I will admit I don't totally get, especially how they're like behind us 4-6 in quad 1 and 17-10 Rutgers team, like a full 10 spots behind. Right. I don't totally understand how it works. I'm glad that there are other things that play into your seeding than just your net ranking, but the eye test for me, just looking at the graphic of the net rankings, looks a little bit backwards, but nonetheless, we're past the. Hey, I wonder. Northwestern still needs to finish strong to solidify their tournament chances. We're past that at this point.
Yeah, there are the 3 best resumes in the Big Ten are clear. You can debate whether you want IU or Northwestern second, but nobody is. It's 1, 2, 3. Those are your top 3 seeds from the Big Ten right now, and. This is what I thought. I wanted to confirm it. So they were 10-8 when they made the tournament the other time in the Big Ten. So I think you're right. They were just good enough. They won the games they were supposed to, got a couple fine wins here or there. So this, at 11-5, this is also their best Big Ten season ever.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Kentucky's my winner.
I figured.
Wins over number 10 Tennessee and at Mississippi State. That's 2 quad 1 wins. They doubled their quad 1 wins on the season. Now 4-7. And those opportunities, 9-8 in quad 1 and 2 combined. An absolutely massive week for a team dancing around the last 4 in bubble conversation. Like, that is the type of week, if they end up in the tournament, this is going to be the week that we look back on and say, okay, that's the week that put them in position to be in position. And as long as they finish strong, and I didn't write down what they have left, and I'll find it here in a second. I'll let you respond and find it. But a really massive week for Kentucky, and a team that is quietly, they're clearly not an elite basketball team, but a team that has, for the most part, the last 6 weeks or so, done some good things. And then you have a really strong week, right? The Tennessee win was at Rupp. Mississippi State was on the road, so you get another road win there, and just a really good week for John Calipari's team, and they needed it in a very big way, because you lose both of those games, you're 2-9 in quad 1. The situation is much, much different. Even if you split the games, to get both of them this week, absolutely huge. Yeah,
and now you've got a season sweep of Tennessee, obviously, to kind of build your portfolio around. And yeah, now it's back. We're back to kind of where we were a few weeks ago, where Kentucky just needs to do enough the rest of the way, right? They have the foundation they need, and there isn't that much time left to mess it up. There is still time, but right, they went from, we had the same conversation the last time they beat Tennessee. Well, maybe that's going to, save their season, make sure they get in the NCAA tournament, and then they fell apart and then picked it back up and got themselves right back on the bubble and then beat Tennessee again. Yeah. We're kind of going in this cycle here. You just got to make sure that, right, they don't have to do anything spectacular the rest of the way. They need to just not fall apart the way that they did the last time after they beat Tennessee. But absolutely, in terms of consequences for whether you make the NCAA tournament or not, from a positive perspective, it's not close in terms of who had the best week.
Florida versus Auburn versus Vanderbilt and at Arkansas is what you got left. And honestly, you'd probably wish that was a little bit stronger of a schedule than it actually has ended up being. If you're looking at the end of the season, I mean, Auburn is still top 30 in the net, but Arkansas not having the season that, for one reason or another, but Arkansas is still 19th in the net. So there are still quad one opportunities there. Vanderbilt at home is the one you probably can't afford, or that you'd like to, at the very least, you'd like to avoid. In terms of getting docked in the net, but as long as they are solid the rest of the way, maybe grab an extra win in the SEC tournament to really solidify things and make you feel better on Selection Sunday. They're in a pretty good spot. They're now, since January 14th, they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 3 since January 14th, and that includes 2 wins over Tennessee. And a win over Mississippi State, a win over Florida. They have beat Vanderbilt in Nashville already. So still, right, when you go up and down the schedule, you still don't have a ton of great wins. Those Tennessee wins are really carrying the load for you in terms of key wins perspective. So still not a ton of margin for error. Of course, it's a bubble team. There never is. But on the right side of the bubble on this Monday morning as a result of the last week. You're a loser.
North Carolina.
Okay, all right. This is the one that this is the actual correct answer. Like, usually I think there's an argument for several different teams, and I like the Northwestern thing if for no other reason other than it's Northwestern solidifying themselves in the NCAA tournament, and that's just fun. But I think this was the right answer this week. Crazy stat, and then I'll let you talk. 364 days apart, North Carolina was 45th in the net and had 0 quad one wins on February 19th of this year, or February 18th of this year, and February 19th a year ago. Kind of crazy. Shouts to our buddy Lucas Harkins for that one. But a little bit of a deja vu moment here, but I think we would both agree a little bit different considering they've now lost 5 of their last 6.
Yeah, and I will throw out an honorable mention before we talk about North Carolina, and that is Clemson. I mean, in any other week when this doesn't happen in North Carolina, losing to Louisville probably does it for you, as, a team that is by no means guaranteed to make the NCAA tournament and quite possibly could miss the NCAA tournament because of that loss. That was not a good thing either. But, yeah, you get Miami at home, NC State on the road, right? You have your two opportunities for really good wins. And you come out of it with 0 quad one wins for the season, as you said. You're now 500 in ACC play without having really beaten anybody, especially on the road. And 500 in the ACC doesn't carry the same weight as, 500 in the SEC or 500 in the Big 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they don't make the tournament, this is probably the week you look back on as to the reason why. Or maybe that's not necessarily fair, as the biggest missed opportunity in terms of changing the trajectory of this thing. Because even if you get one of these games, it's a different conversation. And, they hung in there against NC State, and then NC State just kind of exploded for a brief second, and the game was over. And shout out to NC State and Kevin Keats. That's a special win for that program that is just clearly better than both North Carolina and Duke, which is one of the more remarkable sentences to be said about this season, I feel like. So good for the Wolfpack as well. Those guards are outstanding, and North Carolina learned that the hard way.
100%. This is kind of the nail in the coffin of not their NCAA tournament hopes. There are still ways for them to get into the tournament. But this is kind of the nail in the coffin of why this year on February 20th is different than last year on February 20th. They lost to Pitt on Wednesday, February 16th last year, and they had won 6 of their last 7 prior to that loss. They lost to Pitt on February 16th, then rattled off 6 straight wins, including a win at Duke and against Virginia, and then lost to Virginia Tech to end the season. And at that point, they were pretty much in the tournament at that point. But So from where are we right this second, is there still time for them to go on a run? Like, yes, there's still time for them to go on a run. But the form was clearly going in the right direction last year before people kind of realized really that North Carolina was rolling. And this year it's the complete opposite, right? Instead of winning 6 of their last 7, they've lost 5 of their last 6. They've had games where they couldn't play defense. They've had games where their offense fell off the left side of the map. You go from losing by 1 against Pitt and scoring 64 and losing by 6 against Duke and scoring 57 to giving up 92 points in a 7-point loss. Then you have the Clemson win right there in the middle, because that might be the only other team in the ACC trying to fight against their aspirations more than North Carolina. And, the last 7 days, you just saw a team that's just not quite good enough, right? They're just not there. 2 8-point losses to Miami and NC State. I actually think that's quite fitting that both of them were just these 8-point losses that you didn't really have a chance at the very end, and you're just not quite as good as some of these teams, and you're supposed to be better than all of them, which is, in a nutshell, kind of to your point about NC State being clearly better than they are. That's just kind of the perfect way to embody the season for North Carolina. Is they're just not that good. And there are teams that you would have never in a million years thought were going to be better than them this season. And they are. And now you're 16-11 and 8-8 in the ACC. Could be the first team ever to be a preseason number 1 team and miss the tournament. That is a crazy thing to say. That is a crazy, to by definition not have one of the 68 best resumes after starting as a preseason number 1 team in the country is crazy town. Maybe not by definition. I guess by definition it would be what the 34, the 36 best resumes, right? Because you get 32.
Yeah, you can have a little conversation about that. Yeah,
right. So of the 36 spots that are there for teams that are getting in based on resume. As of right now, you don't have one of those 34 resumes, right? To make it very black and white, of course, is pretty impressive. 5-11 in quad 1 and 2, and 0-8 in quad 1 right now. Notre Dame, UVA, Florida State, and Duke left on their regular season schedule, by the way. Both of those games against Duke and Virginia are at home. So
need them
there's
both.
Something. Yeah. Now that means
probably.
that you're going to go on the road to Notre Dame and Florida State, and you can't lose either of those games against 2 bad ACC teams. You can't afford to do that, and I don't have the utmost faith in them to do either of those things. Okay. Anything else on winners and losers?
No, let's jump in.
Kansas and Baylor. One of the more lopsided games between 2 top 10 teams I've ever seen, and not in the one team dominated the other.
Oh, no.
One team dominated. Both teams happened to dominate in this game on one side of halftime or the other. The final score here is Kansas 87, Baylor 71. Baylor was up 45-32 at halftime. Kind of the flipping of stats is pretty amusing here. And then Kansas put together one of the more impressive halves of the entire season, scoring 55 and outscoring them by, what is that? 24? No, 29. 29? And they win by 16. There are lots of stats here, but I'll get your gut reaction first.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe what I was watching the entire game.
Yeah.
I actually laughed out loud multiple times in the first half.
You mean on Baylor's 9 of 14 from the 3-point line?
Yeah, specifically Keontae George, who just pulled up from deep NBA range a couple times. One of them was an and one. Yeah. He got fouled and still hit the shot. I mean, there's just nothing. I mean, now part of this was Baylor got to the offensive glass. Kansas made a couple defensive mistakes, and so all of a sudden you got 3 good looks from 3, right? So Cryer hits one, Flagler hits one, and all of a sudden they're going. Keontae George makes one, and now he's rolling. And when he's rolling, I mean, he was just taking heat check after heat check, and he was making them. Mm-hmm. They were bad shots, and it just didn't matter. He went into Steph Curry mode, where every shot is a good shot because it's coming from his hand.
Right.
And
those 3 guards had 45 in the first half, by the way.
Yes, they scored
42 in the first half.
Yeah, there was a while where they had scored into the 30s. They had scored every single point. Yeah.
Jalen Bridges knocked down the lone 3 he took, And
Right.
those were the only 3 points, not from the back.
Right. The other points were another 3-pointer. Yeah. And then Kansas started playing really good defense, and Baylor just didn't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
The real thing I want to talk about, though, is even in that first half, I was just sitting there going, this Baylor defense is bad. Which is not a new point, but just it got glossed over because they were hitting every shot they took and looked like the best team in the country because they were just knocking down everything. But Kansas
couldn't hit the broadside of the ball.
Yes, right. Kansas was shooting the ball really poorly. Yeah. But they were getting good looks. They were getting fouled inside. Just fundamentally, the defense was awful. And then the second half, Baylor stops getting easy baskets. Kansas stops making defensive mistakes. Kansas starts getting out in transition because Baylor turns the ball over. And there was just no defensive resistance whatsoever. Their on-ball defense was atrocious.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't matter who it was, who was attacking the basket. It was fouling KJ Adams. It was DeJuan Harris and Jalen Wilson blowing by people. And they had held 6 of their last 8 opponents under 70 points. During this win streak, they've had a couple bad defensive performances, but they'll score 84 and it's fine because they'll win, 84-76.
Mm-hmm.
This was back to Baylor at the beginning of the season where we just both kind of said, well, they're not good enough defensively. Because in that first half, I was really wondering if we needed to have a conversation about Baylor being one of the front runners to win the national championship.
Mm-hmm.
My hesitation was I still don't like what I see defensively, and then the second half happened, and we're not having that conversation.
Which I would have immediately written off just based on their 85th at KenPom and being the worst Big 12 defense in conference play at KenPom.
Right.
Real quick, these stats are funny. So in the first half, Baylor was 16 of 31 from the floor, and Kansas was 10 of 27 and 1 of 11 from deep. In the second half, Kansas was 19 of 30 from the field, and Baylor was 10 of 28 from the field and 1 of 11 from deep. Anyways, Baylor is the perfect example because in Jonathan Tchamwa coming back and bringing some of that defensive versatility back is certainly helpful. But what you're seeing with Baylor right now is just how important a point of attack defender is, and they just don't have any of them.
Mm-hmm.
There's only, just like on the offensive end, I'm very much there's only so much you can do if your best player is a, traditional big. You're seeing that with Purdue on a nightly basis right now, is that even if you have the best player in the country, if your guards aren't playing well, then there's not a ton, you have a very real ceiling. But when the guy that kind of is the anchor of your defense, and really the entire perimeter is a negative defensively. You would agree with that? Yes. There's no, none of them are a net, not even a net neutral. They're just not good defensively.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only so much that you can do if you're Scott Drew with defensive game planning and it's not like Jonathan Tchamwa is absolutely dominant defensively, right? It's he's a good defender and a versatile one and super important, but it's not like he's going to make up for all of those shortcomings that happen elsewhere defensively. And that's just the unfortunate reality is not that it's not like postseason defense is going to change that. It's not like locking in defensively a little bit more is going to change that.
Oh yeah, no.
Right? They just don't have the horses for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be the thing that ultimately kills Baylor, because I actually had this written down. We're in a season right now that I'm not 100% confident in anybody's ability to win 6 straight games in the NCAA tournament.
Exactly.
Zero. Not a single team in the country am I would bet on that team to win 6 straight games. Not a single one, not even Alabama. And Kansas showed in the second half why they should be on the short list of teams that you could believe in to do that. But when it comes to Baylor, that offense is spectacular. And do I have faith that offense could be good enough for 6 straight games? Yes, but I'm not sure the defense could be good enough for 6 straight games to get them all the way there. Because there will be a night where the offense is just good, not great. and I'm not sure they're equipped to win that game in March this time around.
Yeah, and it's weird because they've almost been doing that, right? It was 10 of 11 coming into this against
and I just don't care.
Right, which is against what is essentially NCAA tournament teams, right?
Yeah. They won 6 straight against West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Arkansas.
Yeah, so that's not exactly.
There are 5 tournament teams there? 4?
Yeah, and not exactly outside of Kansas. You're not talking about Elite Eight, Final Four caliber teams. So
other than that, they don't have a 6-game winning streak this year.
Right. Yeah, just consistently over the last 5-6 weeks.
Yeah, sure.
They've, even though the defense has been good enough until this game, but yeah, even watching that first half, I was having a real mental hurdle of maybe I need to get on board with this again and go back to my original preseason stance on this. But I was also watching what was happening and going, I just don't think I can get there because they can't guard people, which is again not new. And then the other part of this is obviously Kansas really needed to make sure they didn't lose this game at home, particularly because up next in a matter of hours as we're recording this is TCU on the road, and you still got to play at Texas. Mm-hmm. You need to defend home court because I feel like Baylor still has a shot if they can pull things back together, but it really looks like this is going to come down to Kansas and Texas, and a Kansas team that has struggled at points on the road still has 2 really difficult road games left. And, so it just gets weirder and weirder in the Big 12, and I still don't exactly – just no one of these teams is that much better than the other one. I feel like we're going to get some kind of tie.
Yeah, it was an important one. There's plenty of close of big games left for Kansas, 2 of their last 4. Kansas and Texas, right now the Big 12 looks as such. This would be really, really intriguing if Baylor had found a way to win that game. Because then you're looking at them at 10-4 and Kansas at 9-5. But it's Kansas and Texas atop the Big 12 at 10-4, Baylor at 9-5, and really, did they end with Texas? That's right? Oh, that's so lit. That's so lit that those 2 teams are going to play in the regular season. But it's kind of faded into that, which I think is interesting. That all of the teams that have kind of threatened as the best team in the conference this year. Whether it be, and TCU's kind of struggled with injuries. I mean, they've been really, really good when Mike Miles is on the floor. Yep. Like really, really good. And them healthy for an entire Big 12 conference schedule. I think there's definitely a conversation that 7-7 team is more like 9-5, if not better than that.
Absolutely.
And but Iowa State kind of knocked on the door. Kansas State kind of knocked on the door, and it's right. All of those teams are really, really high quality teams. I haven't mentioned a team that's outside of the top 24 at KenPom yet. And but here we are kind of at the end of it with the team that's probably the most talented in the conference, or the 2 most talented teams in the conference, and Kansas right there as they always are, and probably looking at a showdown on when is that? On March 4th. At the Moda Center. Man, can we go? Moody. Right. Moody, Moda. Moody Center? Mata. Moody Center. Yes, sorry. The Moody Center. That's gonna be absolutely lit. But a bunch of teams kind of knocking on the door in the Big 12 this year, and all of them are spectacular. But here we are, 2.5 weeks or so out from the end of the regular season, and there Kansas and Texas are right there, and Baylor is right behind them, kind of like we thought it might end up being at the beginning of the season.
Yep. Took a while to get there, but we got there.
We did indeed. Speaking of only 2.5 weeks out from the NCAA tournament, top 16 seeds were announced from the selection committee this weekend. And here's what it looks like. Okay, number one overall seed is Alabama, followed by Houston, Purdue, and Kansas. On the 2 line, you have 2 more Big 12 teams in Baylor and Texas, along with 2 Pac-12 teams in UCLA and Arizona. And then the number 3 seeds, Virginia, Tennessee, Iowa State, and Kansas State. If you're keeping count, that's 5 Big 12 teams on the top 3 seed lines. And then the number 4 seeds, Indiana joins Purdue as the other Big 10 team. Xavier and Marquette representing the Big East on the 4 line, and then Gonzaga was the 15th overall seed, Xavier being the 16th. What say you? Gut reactions? Do you care at all? Give me what you got.
Yeah, I was upset about some things. I care about this, but
I'm glad you were. Talk to me.
I just have some fundamental issues with some of this. Now, the question is, does this actually matter at the end of the day, right? Because from our friend Lucas will tell you, right, the bracketologist will tell you this is kind of an indication of where things are going in terms of what the committee is prioritizing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The top 4, I would have had the exact same thing. No issues there. To me, Alabama has the best resume. Houston's been, from a wins-loss perspective, right, they just kind of never drop too far. They lose, and then they win 5 in a row. They should be 2 because Purdue slipped up recently with those road games in the Big Ten. And Kansas, yes, there's a lot of losses there, but also Kansas played arguably the best schedule in the country and are right there in the best conference in the country. They have to be one of the top 4 seeds at this moment in time.
Do you know how many quad 1 wins Kansas has?
It's 13 or something, isn't it?
Yeah, they're 13 and 5.
Yeah.
They have 4. Purdue is second at 9 and 4. They have 4 more wins than the second most. That is the nature of being 10 and 4 in the Big 12.
And playing Kansas's non-conference schedule.
Right.
Yeah.
You add that as well, but it's lovely. When you look at the most quad 1 wins in the country, 4 of the top 5 are Big 12 teams. Anyways, continue.
Yeah, so they have to be there too, just based on essentially that. My issues. Why is Arizona ahead of UCLA? That just makes no sense to me.
Well, good sir. It's got to be because of quad 1 wins. They're 7 and 2 in quad 1 to UCLA's 5 and 4.
Yeah.
So they're 13 and 4 in quad 1 and 2, and UCLA is 12 and 4.
Yeah, which means UCLA has lost to better teams.
It's true. They also don't have as many quad 1 wins.
Right.
They also have a worse winning percentage against those good teams. They've both played 9 quad 1 games, and Arizona is 2 games better in that category than UCLA.
Right. And this is where I feel like disagree with most people, because to me, the flip side to valuing quad 1 wins and these valuing all the high quality wins, that means that you are also rewarding those teams. Assuming you're similar in the wins loss standpoint, that also means that Arizona's losses are worse than UCLA's, and that part of it never gets talked about. Now they do play again, if I remember correctly, so this could very easily flip. It's going to take care of itself. I want UCLA's consistency. I mean, 2 of those losses came in that tournament, and other than that, they've been outstanding. My bigger issue.
They also did lose the head-to-head.
Yes.
Which I'm not sure how much that matters, but they did lose the head-to-head.
Which to me goes back into UCLA's column of, that means Arizona lost to somebody not named Arizona, and UCLA's losses to Arizona. Mm-hmm. I feel very strongly about this, and nobody else seems to care. So I'm going to bring it up. My bigger issue.
Because it's 16 teams on February 20th. It doesn't matter.
I'm just talking about it generally as a philosophy. Everybody values all of these wins. It doesn't talk about the bad losses. Yeah. No, right. This is just a fun experiment The one thing I really had an issue with. There should not, under any circumstances, be multiple Big East teams ahead of Creighton on this list. If you want to say Marquette, I've got no issue with that. I might disagree with you if I really thought about it, but that's fine. Based on the schedule Creighton has played and the context of the season and what Creighton has done with Ryan Kalkbrenner healthy, which is in theory the team you're going to get in the NCAA tournament, they at the very least are the second Big East team. That is the one issue I really had with this list.
Can I ask you why? They're worse than both of those teams in quad 1 and 2.
Right, because they lost a bunch of quad 1 games without Kalkbrenner. And they had that.
So TCU was spectacular without Mike Miles. With Mike Miles on the floor, should they be in this list too? Because their performance with Mike Miles suggests they should.
Yes, except for their record isn't. My point is that Creighton has gotten back to the point where their record is comparable.
TCU and Creighton's record are the exact same.
Oh yeah, I guess so.
Creighton is 18-9, and TCU is 18-9.
I mean, I would have no issue with TCU being in this conversation. I feel like Creighton, specifically comparing Creighton to the other Big East teams.
Okay. They've also lost for both of those teams, by the way.
Yes, Creighton, which again is a check in the box of quality loss after quality loss after quality loss.
But at some point, you got to win the games. You also have losses to Nebraska, BYU, and Arizona State.
Yes, they had the really. Yes,
if you're actually a top 4 seed, you don't lose those games without Ryan Kalkbrenner.
They had a very bad stretch there. Yes.
I'm just not sure what you're supposed to do if you're not using the actual resume and you're using a hypothetical if Ryan Kalkbrenner was in the game.
To me, it's more of a tiebreaker kind of thing. Do you feel like Xavier's resume at this point, with losses to DePaul and Butler, is that much stronger than Creighton's? Taking the Kalkbrenner context out of it?
I mean, I think it's comparable.
Exactly. That's my point.
I think Xavier has. I mean, yeah, but if it's comparable, you just have to pick one. And the committee is just going to pick the team with more overall wins. They're just going to. And it's a team they have the exact same record in the Big East.
Yeah, and that's why I just fundamentally disagree. That's my point, is that I feel like it's close enough where you got to give Creighton the tiebreaker. Because, I guess, okay, so then you get into the Wolf, Zach Freemantle's not there, and I get it. Again, this is, making a bigger deal probably out of this than it needs to be.
Nah, go for it. I'm here for
it. I understand they had the bad stretch. Since then, they have been significantly better than Xavier.
I mean, the record would say that that's incorrect because both of them are 12-4.
Well, right, but part of that, since Creighton lost their first 2 Big East games or something like that, right?
Something like that. No, they didn't. Yeah, they lost their first one and then won 3 straight.
Okay.
They lost 3 of their first 6.
Okay. Yeah. So since then,
they're like what is that? 9-1 since January 14th.
Right. And that was an overtime loss at Providence.
Mm-hmm.
That part of it has to, and I understand, right? It's overall, but I get that there is a gaping hole in Creighton's resume in the form of that losing streak. Just Xavier, and that's where I'm fine if Marquette probably deserves to be ahead of them. I got no problem saying that. At this point, I'm just all in on Creighton, and I don't know what else.
That's what this is really about. You picked Creighton for the season to go to the Final Four. This is what this is really about.
I don't know what else.
You need them to be a better than 5 seed because that increases your chance.
I'll still pick them. I don't care.
Really? Okay.
If they're not showing you what they are with Ryan Kalkbrenner at this point by going through the Big East this way, at some point I guess my big point here, and then I have two other things I want to mention. At some point we have to care about bad losses.
Right. And Creighton has 4 of them.
And Creighton has some, and Xavier also has some.
Yes, but Creighton has some too.
Yeah,
Creighton has just as many as Xavier.
Which is why
it doesn't matter if they were in the Big East or not.
Right. Oh, 100%. Yeah. I'm not saying Creighton should be a 3 seed or anything.
You keep saying things that add up to Xavier is just as worthy of a 4 seed as Creighton is.
Right. Which you give the tiebreaker to the team that's been way better at full strength.
But are you sure that Creighton has been better than Xavier at full strength?
Well, the Fremantle thing makes it a different conversation. I guess what I'm really here for is Creighton's non-conference schedule. Even though I understand they took some bad losses in there.
Can you hear the gears turning, guys? No, I also think and I also just don't understand I will admittedly I have no interest in trying to decide what the NCAA tournament, what the selection committee is going to try to do, because people can write all day about how they've figured out what's important to the committee. Nobody really knows what's important to the committee because it's different every single year. Yeah. That's why we write these articles when this top 16 come out, because you have to figure out every single year what the committee has decided is important to them in that particular year.
Right.
Which is super frustrating. But what's the point of the net and a team sheet and all of these other things if Creighton is 13 spots ahead of Xavier, 12 spots ahead of them in KenPom? And I haven't looked at the other ones, admittedly, because I don't especially care. But I would just love for it to make a little bit more sense.
Right. That's my point. Is that
other than Xavier having a better quad 1 and 2 record combined, and they both having a quad 3 loss.
Right. They both have some bad losses.
And maybe that's the answer.
I think it's just quad. Yeah. For some reason, there's an obsession with quad 1 wins, it seems.
For some reason. Wait, hold on.
It's important. It's not the be all end all.
Xavier is by definition better than Creighton from a quad perspective, by definition. In quad 1 and 2, they are 11 and 6, and Creighton is 9 and 8, and they both have a quad 3 loss and have a loss of quad 4 games.
Sure.
So maybe it doesn't need to be more difficult than that. I just don't understand how that adds up to Xavier being 13 spots behind Creighton. Mm-hmm. I don't especially understand the predicting the tournament bracket is one of my least favorite things that we do before the tournament. I just wish we could and I get that's all part of it. I just sound like a get off my lawn guy at this point, but it sounds to the bracketologists who from day one of the tournament of the year are building out brackets and paying attention. I salute the heck out of you, because there is not enough money in the world for me to do that job. And you just get yelled at all day. Tennessee beat Kentucky, and you have Kentucky over Tennessee.
Oh, yeah. That's
a bad example, but you get my point, right?
I can't stand the head-to-head thing.
How did Memphis drop when they lost to Houston, bro? How did Memphis lose when they dropped to Houston, bro? I saw that 12 different times across a bunch of different people's tweeting out their brackets. Anyways, I salute those people, because that sounds horrible. Did you know that all bracketologists hate all 363 Division I teams?
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't, you're not doing it right.
That's exactly right. Anyway.
Yeah, I guess my other point is that all quad 1 wins are not created equal, right? I understand it's trying to make them more equal. There's some added context that gets missed when you just throw things into quad 1, 2, 3, and 4. The other two things I wanted to mention quickly. Why is the other thing I didn't really understand that you alluded to earlier? Indiana is 6 and 7 in quad 1. So that doesn't make any sense that they're there in the top 16 and 13th?
They are 13th. Yeah, yes. They're the number 1 4 seed.
So how does that happen?
That's a great question. Let's see. So the other teams kind of in conversation, we're talking UConn, we're talking Creighton, we're talking Miami, we're talking St. Mary's. So if you just let's just take those 4 teams, for example. Indiana, right, 6 and 7, they're 10 and 8 in quad 1 and 2. 6 and 7 in quad 1, like you said. If we were to jump to, we already did Creighton, so Creighton is 4 and 6 in quad 1. And 9 and 8 we said in quad 1 and 2. Miami, the Canes. Let's see. Why is this backwards? Okay, we're here. Miami is 6 and 4 in quad 1, 9 and 4 in quad 1 and 2. I'm guessing their strength of schedule has something to do with it. That would be my guess there. They do have a quad 3 loss, which I'm not sure Indiana has one of those. I can't think of one off the top of my head if they do have one. Indiana does not have a quad 3 loss. And then we talked about Creighton and then St. Mary's and the WCC. We'd also probably have to go. I mean, they've only played 3 quad 1 games. They're 8-3 in that discussion. They also do have 2 quad 3 losses. So 2 of their 5 losses are quad 3, which probably knocks them down. So the more like talking through it, I get it. I'm sure there are some other teams. UConn, Creighton, and Miami, and St. Mary's were the 4 teams that I kind of kept seeing people talk about kind of in the conversation of who was just on the outside looking in. So from that perspective, there aren't none of those 4 teams completely jump off the page to me, but I wouldn't have an issue. I also saw that there were people who didn't have Indiana in and had St. Mary's in instead. So I'm here for the conversation, but at least from those 4 teams, nothing especially jumps off the page for me.
Because that goes right. If we're going to care about quad 1 wins, then I can disagree with it and complain about it. It is what it is. And
UConn is 6-6 in quad 1, so basically right there with Indiana.
Just there's a massive difference in this from 13 to 16, right? It's not that I have a fundamental issue with Indiana being in. I just don't understand why Indiana's 13th. And then you mentioned St. Mary's. I was happy to see Gonzaga ahead of St. Mary's. Both of these teams have lost to Loyola Marymount, so don't start talking to me about Gonzaga's bad loss. Mm-hmm. And, Gonzaga's schedule, because of their non-conference, is just so much better that you're essentially back to kind of strength of schedule, quality wins, tiebreaker, and Gonzaga's winning that 11 times out of 10. So St. Mary's having a great season. They can still get themselves into this 4-seed conversation, right? Another win against Gonzaga, that kind of thing. But at this moment in time, to me, there's no discussion to be had about which of those teams has a better resume.
And that comes with the perks of being Gonzaga and having that name on your chest instead of St. Mary's, just from the kind of non-conference schedule you can put together perspective, right? When you look at St. Mary's non-conference schedule, the marquee matchup was Houston, one that they lost. The best win they had in non-conference from a KenPom perspective, San Diego State, but that's it. And when you go to the Gonzaga side of things, like Gonzaga is a team that has a win over the number 1 overall seed, right? And they have a win over Xavier, and they have a win over Kentucky, and they have a win over Michigan State. And they also just don't lose. That Loyola Marymount loss is a stinker. Their other losses are Texas, Purdue, Baylor, and St. Mary's, right? Those are 3 teams that we just talked about on the 1 and 2 lines. So I got no qualms with that. I think both teams are 23-5. So I got no issues there. No issues there. I'm not sure how I feel about
thoughts. I know I just kind of rambled.
I'm not sure how I feel about the 16 seed practice. How do you feel about it? Are like do you find it helpful? Do you just does it? I would, and I'm sure bracketologists are. Well, it gives me a better chance at being more accurate because I get an idea of what the committee is focused on, so I'm sure if I was doing that as practice throughout the entire year, that it would be very helpful in being able to adjust my kind of how my bracket is unfolding if need be. So from that perspective, I'm sure it's helpful, but it's kind of I feel the same way about that I feel about 4 weeks out, 4 or 5 weeks out from the end of the season, we start having the college football top 25, at halftime of a college game. I'm just kind of okay, is this important? Yeah, and of course it's more important when only 4 teams get a chance to play for a national championship instead of 68. But one bracketologist concluded his article with saying, and by the time you read this, it'll be a moot point because in 2 hours this is going to be different, and there were
because look at what already happened.
Right, exactly, exactly. But hence the nature of mid-season bracketology.
That's what I was going to say is right, and the difference between this and football, right? Football, at least the value is if these teams win out, that's your playoff pretty much. And if one of these teams loses, here's the next team in line. Mm-hmm. Where this is, we're going to unveil this. Then some of these teams are going to lose within a matter of hours. then more of them are going to lose in the middle of next week. And by the time you go try and do this again in 7 days, it's going to look completely different. And a lot of the right, if you're not, because I'm with you that I don't really enjoy this conversation. I would much rather just talk about what happens on the floor, get to the bracket, analyze the bracket, and then break down the tournament. There actually is a value
here on the Jays Fairs podcast for the most part,
right? Which is why we don't jump into bracketology all that much, because we can talk in circles about this kind of stuff all day. I really just I don't put a lot of stock or investment into this. It's a thing that happens. I glance at it. Oh, that's interesting. I still disagree about the Creighton thing, but
and then we get 20 minutes on the pod about it.
Right. You can talk about it. It's one of those things you can talk about it as long as you want, right? Whether there's, it's also one of those things that at this point is moot, because some of these teams have already lost, and it's all going to work itself out because some of these teams are going to play each other, right? If Creighton deserves to end up on the 4 line or the 3 line, that's going to happen by the way they perform the rest of the season. If St. Mary's is going to catch Gonzaga, they're going to have the opportunity to do that, and then we get to the seeds, and at that point, it doesn't really matter all that much whether you're a 3 or a 4 or a 5. Eventually, your matchups change a little bit, but yeah.
There you go.
I'm with you.
You got anything else?
No, I think my emotional energy is spent at this point.
All right, man. It's only 9 a.m. That is an early day. That is an early time for your emotional energy to already be spent. But I'm not entirely sure. I disagree with you. That's all we got for you today. Please subscribe to the Jays for Days podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at Jays for Days Pod, and we'll be back at the end of the week. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh, and we will see you later.